It's the top 20 movies of 2024. Wow. This year as a whole has been one of my strangest. Personally, academically, professionally, politically. It's just been a very existential time for me. So luckily, I've been taking the time to go escape and go to the theaters often. I've seen almost 60 newly released films, which is an all-time high for myself, and another all-time high of watching over 150 films throughout the course of this year. There are definitely some big releases that I neglected to get to throughout the year, so if you don't see some of these movies on the list, it's nothing against you. I just probably haven't seen them, or some of them I might not have liked. There were a lot of first-time watches for me this year, and some of my favorites were The Godfather Part 2, I know, shut the f*** up. 2001: A Space Odyssey, I know, shut the f*** up. Spirited Away, Amelie, All the President's Men, La La Land, Twin Peaks: The Return, Mulholland Drive, The Virgin Suicides, The Return of the Living Dead, Election, Apocalypse Now, The King of Comedy, Lady Snowblood, The Big Lebowski, Nowhere, Irma Vep, The Exorcist 3, and Little Shop of Horrors, just to name a few. We also had some pretty great television in my opinion. Both of this year's seasons of Survivor were absolutely fantastic, but I did prefer season 46 to 47. The Boys had a killer fourth season, The Bear had its most challenging season yet, The Penguin and Mr. and Mrs. Smith were two of the biggest surprises of the entire year, X-Men 97 stepped up to be my favorite thing Disney Plus has ever produced, period, and Baby Reindeer came in and blew everyone away and easily was the best show of the entire year. But now that we've gotten all that out of the way, let's talk about 2024 movies, but I still gotta lead you on a little bit. Before we get to the best, let me mention some of the worst. My top 5 least favorite movies of the year were Red One, one of the most expensive movies of the year, definitely doesn't let it show with its terrible CGI and theme park looking sets. Bob Marley: One Love, one good performance definitely can't save this overly sanitized and Super Bowl commercial looking mess. Boy Kills World, the action was well choreographed, but I couldn't look past the blatant racism on display throughout the entire movie. Madam Web, I just want to sit in a room with the entire producing team and just whack them.
Belted me right across the chops.
And Uglies, one of the laziest and least exciting YA adaptations of all time, making it worse by being an adaptation of my favorite YA dystopian series. Okay, but now that we've gotten all of that over with, let's finally get into some of the best, with some honorable mentions. Monkey Man, Dev Patel's explosive directorial debut left me full of hype as it explored some incredibly rich social commentary while being an amazingly choreographed action spectacle. Saturday Night, a raunchy and exciting slice of life chronicling the hours leading up to the first performance of Saturday Night Live, with some great character acting and amazing editing. The Apprentice, a well-constructed and impeccably satirical film with some of the most impressive biopic performances of all time. The Fall Guy, one of the most underrated releases of the entire year that I feel succeeded in being the action rom-com it set out to be in spades, with some of the best action sequences of the year, one specifically with Ryan Gosling hopping between two moving helicopters. Wicked, stuffed to the brim with incredible production design, performances, and top-notch CGI, the Wicked fan in me was more than satisfied with this adaptation. The music is as chill-inducing as ever, and that's even before we added the perfect vocal performances from the entire cast, but specifically Cynthia Erivo. Alrighty, now into the top 20. One of the most impressively frightening movies of the entire year, this movie really took me by surprise. I knew absolutely nothing going into it, and it was one of the most adrenaline-pumping experiences in a theater this year. The jump scares were absolute perfection and kept me on my toes throughout the entire runtime. I wasn't a huge fan of a good chunk of the third act, but the very end, I thought, tied all the themes together really well. If you're looking for a genuine scare and you've already seen Longlegs, I would definitely give this a shot. Scott Beck and Brian Woods continually prove themselves to be some of the most innovative minds working in the horror space at the moment. They're constantly pumping out material that's engaging and exciting, and I think that this is a great departure from their high-octane work of the past. This is a slow and methodical look into what makes people believe or disbelieve in some sort of faith. Hugh Grant gives an impressively creepy performance outside of the cliche Reddit atheism, and Chloe East is a standout, as she really delivers as our final girl of sorts. Anna Kendrick's directorial debut is the best true crime thriller of the year. A loose retelling of the serial murders committed by Rodney Alcala, winner of the classic 70s game show The Dating Game. This has some of the greatest sequences of suspense in any movie this year. There were multiple moments throughout watching this where I found myself white-knuckling my pillow, and I feel like that's a testament to Anna Kendrick's direction because there isn't much being done or seen, but there's always this lingering and looming threat of impending violence that's really eerie and stress-inducing. It was a huge surprise, and I really hope more people check it out because it didn't seem like many people caught it when it came out. I just saw it last night, kiddos, and holy moly, this was the visual masterpiece that everyone is claiming it to be in spades. However, I couldn't help but feel like there could have been a lot more meat on its bones. While I understand that this is more of an adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula told from the perspective of his victims, this still feels like there could have been more of a departure from the classic formula of a Dracula story. Regardless, though, this has some of the best cinematography of the entire year, and some of the best costumes, and two of the best performances of the whole year, with a captivating Lily Rose Depp and a completely indistinguishable Bill Skarsgård, who blew me away with his new take on Count Orlok. Luca Guadagnino continues to be one of my favorite directors working today, with a streak of incredibly personal and stylized work. For a long time, I was personally not really excited for this movie, only because I couldn't really see how Luca's very personal and almost psychedelic directing style would lend well to a sports film. Little did I know that this would turn out to be one of the most emotionally satisfying films of the entire year, with 3 perfectly written characters driven home by 3 awards-worthy performances. In 2020, Rose Glass wrote and directed Saint Maud, which was one of my personal favorite films of that year, for its sense of constantly growing dread, as well as its ability to pull the rug out from under the viewer in a matter of a second. Love Lies Bleeding was easily one of my most anticipated movies of the entire year, but if I'm being completely honest, as I sat there watching the credits, I turned to my friend stating, I don't think I liked that. Very quickly over the course of maybe one discussion, where they put a lot of the movie in perspective for me, did I realize how well constructed this movie was. Every performance was giving dirty, grimy, seedy, but sexy, and they all ride those waves really, really well. It had great action, great romance, and some really crazy body horror that comes out of absolutely nowhere that in retrospect was so much fun. Back in 2017, when the book was released, I immediately became very connected with it for its accurate portrayal of spiraling thoughts caused by clinical anxiety. When a film adaptation was announced, I was incredibly weary because I personally believe that the past 2 John Green films were incredibly risk-free and plain. They didn't really feel like they had a very strong directorial voice or any type of style. This film definitely feels like there's a strong voice behind it. Thank the Lord. Hannah Marks definitely proves herself to be a capable voice, and hopefully she'll rise up in the ranks as years go on. Isabella Merced is in another film that I will be mentioning later on, but I do want to point out the work that her and Cree are doing in this movie because it's absolutely magnificent, and they both have incredible screen presence. Alrighty, you Letterboxd freaks, let's start the debate in the comments. Did I expect this to be this high? No. Do I expect all the Letterboxd freaks to be pissed? Absolutely. Do I give a f***? No. This movie was so much f***ing fun, and the entire time I was in that theater, the audience felt electric, which is a pretty big buzzword, lol buzz, but it's led by 2 incredible performances and one of the most interesting scripts of the year with so many twists and turns that I never saw coming. I don't even really want to say much in case you haven't seen it, because I would really love for everybody else to have the same exact type of experience that I had when I saw it. This was also one of the most fun movies of the year, but I feel like this definitely had more style and flair compared to Strange Darling. We have a cast of really entertaining and well-written characters, very multi-dimensional performances, incredible editing, and when I say incredible editing, I mean this is probably the best editing of the entire year, and some of the most shocking surprises in a movie this year. I don't think I've ever been watching a movie for something so sudden to happen and me instantly hit the spacebar. my pick for the best animated movie of the year, this was just something incredibly special. From the first trailer featuring Lupita Nyong'o singing What a Wonderful World to the early reactions from festivals, I knew this was going to be up there with my best of the year. It's a very gentle and heartfelt movie, and I feel like that's reflected in its beautiful relationship between Brightbill and Roz. It made me emotional while also leaving me hopeful, unlike a good amount of movies this year. We can say a lot about things from 2024, but I definitely think that we can say this was not the year of the feel-good film. Alrighty, now on to the top 10. Don't kill me, okay? Okay, listen, I loved it, okay? If you want to know more about my feelings about Romulus, go check out my video that I did when it came out. Otherwise, just know that I loved it, and I don't want to hear your complaints, okay? While many people do think that Oddity was the scariest movie of the year, I definitely believe that this takes the cake. Nicolas Cage's performance in this movie is one of the most terrifyingly pathetic horror villains of all time. Every time he appeared on screen, my skin crawled. I was never once not on the edge throughout the course of this movie. The cinematography is so unsettling and constantly engaging, and the twists throughout this movie had me absolutely dumbfounded, and on a second watch, I noticed way more than I ever would have the first time around. I also adored Micah Monroe's detailed performance in the way that her character's past and layers keep progressively being peeled back. While I think that the ending was a little abrupt, it still leaves a proper amount of room for speculation around what is to happen in the future. Hopefully, we will never see, because we don't need a sequel, please, Lord. Now sit the f down, okay? When I read this list to people in real life, this is the movie that causes the most confusion when I rank it this high. Why? Because this is a movie made for very, very specific audiences. Queer audiences, yes, but more specifically, people who've used media like film and television as a way to escape the homo or trans repressive reality that we're forced to live in. When I was in my early teens, before I came out of the closet, I was a person who turned to TV shows, specifically Buffy the Vampire Slayer, as a way to think about my problems as nothing but a monster to defeat every week. I connected with the characters as they defied gender and sexual expectations, and it helped me through a really scary time where I didn't know what was truly right or wrong with me. So this movie really hit me in the gut, and as everyone in the theater around me erupted into audible confusion, I realized that this movie was going to be something you kind of have to have experienced yourself to be able to fully enjoy or relate to. And I find that incredibly special, and I hope that Jane Schoenbrun continues to make incredibly personal work, because I'll be there every single time. Bet you forgot this movie came out this year. I saw it 3 times in the theaters, folks. It was so much fun. From the moment that the movie and Anya's casting were announced, I was absolutely hooked. That first trailer dropped and I showed it to everybody. I was there on opening weekend, and it was phenomenal. It's far from the perfection that Fury Road is, but that's because it's not trying to be Fury Road. It's its own thing in its entirety, with a very similar visual style to that of Fury Road, with a more comic book edge. I hope that Anya isn't forgotten in the awards circuit for this movie, because the years of physical and mental dedication to this role was not lost on me throughout the months since I've seen it. The makeup, the production, the casting, the incredibly intricate cinematography, and the booming sound design and score made this join the ranks of being one of the most cinematic, quote-unquote, experiences of the year. This was a movie that affected me on such a visceral level that I went to a party after seeing it in the afternoon, and I had to step outside because the noise was too much, and it put me right back in that theater. Alex Garland has always been a director who tells his stories with so much honesty and humanity that this movie really gets you to connect with these characters emotionally before they're sent out into the chaos. It features some of my favorite sequences of the entire year, including the sequence of Jesse Plemons and the Winter Wonderland sequence. But what I appreciated so much about this movie was that it was something that made me want to become more aware of the state of everything around me, if that makes sense. It made me think as though I had a lot more growing up to do, and there were things about this world that I hadn't truly realized were happening to people on an everyday basis. There's a specific flashback sequence as Kirsten Dunst's character, Lee, takes a bath that's so unbelievably disturbing that genuinely still gives me nightmares to this day. It's a very powerful and evocative movie, and I think the fact that people either only love or hate this movie is a real testament to that exact point. What a special, special little movie. I didn't hear many people talking about this movie other than the occasional mention in a few YouTube videos like June Squibb is doing a heist movie, but this is a very, very different movie. This is a movie about the connection between a grandmother and her grandson. And as somebody who is writing this video in his office 2 rooms down from his grandmother who he currently lives with, I think you can tell why it connected with me so hard. As a film though, it's brilliantly written and directed by Josh Margolin, who takes this concept and makes it something completely different from all the other old people doing cool movies. It makes it a movie about connection and the power of genuine familial love and appreciation, and it frames it in this hilariously constructed quote-unquote heist movie. It's an absolute delight of a movie, and I really hope that more people get to check it out. As somebody who has always been fascinated by the world of sex work, Sean Baker has always been my favorite director to portray the profession on film. He handles it with the utmost respect and has nothing but love for these people who are just doing their jobs. This, I feel, was the culmination of everything that he's ever created thus far. It's a constant stream of honest perfection. Rarely do movies truly ever feel documentary-like, but there were moments in this where I felt as though I was watching very real moments between people as though I was intruding. It's a movie that makes a point of the fact that sex workers are absolutely people, just like you and me. Yeah, there are some that are good and some that are bad, but we're all people and we all deserve to be treated as such. I'll be completely honest and say that I really connect with Annie as a character in the way that she uses her sexuality to mask her pain and unhappiness with her situation, and I can do that sometimes in my own way as well. She uses it for escapism's sake. It just so happens that she can make money while doing such. It's a very, very layered film. I could sit here and talk about it for absolute ever, but just know that this has the best final shot of the year that left me in absolute hysterics for about 20 minutes after leaving the theater. And the most overlooked movie of the year goes to... In all seriousness, when I saw this, it stood at my number 1 for a long time. I felt like I hadn't seen something that original in a hot minute. Julio Torres' mind is explosive and colorful, but not without some reality bombs thrown in there. Featuring 2 of the best and funniest performances of the year, one of the most relatable protagonists I've ever seen, and some of the most creative storytelling through and through that I've seen in decades. Every time I watch it, I'll always come out with the biggest eating grin you'll ever see. I wish that more people saw this or talk about it because it's one of the most relatable movies of the year and one of my favorite A24 films, period. I mean, come on, it's Dune 2. Like, what the f else am I supposed to say? Like, what do you want? Just kidding, I have a lot to say. So, as somebody who grew up with a dad who was in his 20s during the 90s, I was pretty much raised on blockbuster cinema. However, even though most of my entire cinematic knowledge up until high school was big, flashy blockbusters, I still found the good ones to be really special. For example, Jurassic Park is my favorite movie of all time, and that was because it felt way bigger than me. It was something I could never achieve, seemingly. Since around the release of Blade Runner 2049, I've had a strong inkling that Denis Villeneuve was going to create something much bigger than I could ever achieve. This was something beyond that. This was something I could have never seen properly executed in my head, and the fact that it's as perfectly constructed and executed as it is one of the biggest cinematic accomplishments of the 2020s so far. Seeing this on 70mm IMAX thanks to my friend Maddie, I felt completely transported, like how I did when I saw Interstellar in IMAX recently. The sound was booming and heart-pounding, and the production as a whole is one of the greatest I've ever seen from a practical and visual effects and production design standpoint. Every performance is completely electric, and no one ever drops from 100% throughout the entire runtime. This is just one of those movies where you say to yourself, if I could experience that movie for the first time all over again, I would in a heartbeat. But my number 1, my favorite movie of 2024, the movie I've seen the most times, laughed the most at, was shocked by the most, took the most friends to, spent the most money on, was The Substance. I've seen this movie 9 times since August. 9 times. It's unhealthy. It's borderline an obsession, but I'm very okay with it. Coralie Farjat is a director that I've been constantly looking out for since the release of her debut feature, Revenge. When this movie was announced, I was so curious to see how she would approach these themes, and I should have expected it would go as far as it would, but alas, I was more shocked than ever on my first viewing. Seeing this movie for the first time was one of the only times in my life that I have ever experienced genuine, uncontrollable laughter. The kind of laughter that had me clenching my gut and white-knuckling my face to not disturb everybody around me. There was a point in this movie where I just let it all go, and I am cackling throughout the entire last 20 to 15 minutes of this movie, like a witch. I'm howling, yodeling even. I even turned to the two couples sitting to my right and left and apologized to them as the credits rolled, and they both came back with the same responses of, honestly, you added to it. Since then, I've been constantly taking friends to see this movie because I feel as though I need people to talk about this as much as I think about it. I'm currently in a production of Alice by Heart, and one day I convinced other cast members to come see the movie with me, and the reactions are going to be something that I will never forget. Seeing my friends' jaws actually almost hitting the floor and having their minds melt just like mine did was almost as entertaining as the movie. All of this isn't even getting into the meat of the movie, including the Oscar-worthy leading duo of Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley. The impeccable cinematography and production design, the editing that literally fries your brain in the best way possible, and the absolute best practical effects we've seen since latest Pan's Labyrinth, but honestly, I would even say since The Fly. This movie is just a perfect example of what the medium of film should be used for rather than to create mass-produced corporate products. And I will champion that until the day I die. All right. So that is it. That is all of the garbage that I have to spew at you today. There are definitely movies that I should have watched before making this video, but you know what? I've been busy lately, believe it or not. So I barely have time to make this video, but I'm getting it to you. And hey, I watched a lot of fucking movies this year. And if you want to see a list of every single movie I watched in 2024, go check out my Letterboxd. And make sure you follow me on Twitter and Instagram while you're at it, so you can stay up to date on my thoughts on movies before I post videos like this. Thank you everybody again for watching. My name is Jacob. I hope you all have a happy holidays, and I'll see you, Space Cowboy.